I've learned that endings don't always arrive when you expect them to. Sometimes, they slip quietly into your life wearing the disguise of an ordinary evening. That New Year's Eve, I thought I was dressing for a celebration. But looking back, maybe I was dressing for a goodbye. I remember standing in front of the mirror, my fingers trembling as I tried to fasten the clasp of my pearl necklace. It wasn't expensive. Harold gave it to me on our 40th anniversary, saying it made me look like the woman he first fell in love with. I still hear his voice when I touch it. That warm, teasing tone that could melt even my worst days. The pearls shook slightly as I clipped them into place. And I told myself it was just my hands, not my heart. That was unsteady. The navy blue dress still fit, though it hung looser around the arms now. Harold used to say the color brought out my eyes. I smoothed the sleeves and leaned closer to the mirror, tracing the small lines near my mouth. Years of laughter and years of worry, every crease was a memory. I reached for my favorite lipstick. That deep burgundy shade everyone said was too bold for a woman my age. Harold loved it. I suppose I still wear it for him. And maybe for the woman I used to be. As I slipped on my coat and glanced at the clock, I felt something stirring inside me, a soft, cautious hope. I told myself tonight would be different. That maybe this New Year's dinner could bring my family back together again. But even as I locked the door behind me, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was stepping into something I wouldn't forget. After Harold passed 3 years ago, the house grew quieter than I ever imagined it could. Mornings became soft rituals, tea at 7:30. A crossword puzzle I rarely finished. And the sound of birds tapping against the kitchen window. Sometimes I'd catch myself setting 2 cups on the counter out of habit, then quietly putting one back. The silence wasn't cruel, it was just heavy. Like the air had forgotten how to carry laughter. Harold and I had been married for 47 years. He wasn't a man of many words. But when he spoke, people listened. I used to joke that he had a better relationship with the garden than most people did with their friends. Every plant seemed to lean toward him like it knew he cared. Even after all this time, I still find his handwriting on little notes tucked in recipe books or the margins of old calendars. Don't forget to breathe. One of them says, I suppose that's what I've been trying to do. My children live close enough to visit, though somehow, they never quite find the time. Nathan, my eldest, has a successful career and a wife. Iris, who seems allergic to small talk. My second son, David, calls only when something's wrong. The car, the bills, his health. Still, I've always believed that helping them was a mother's duty. When Nathan needed help with his mortgage, I didn't hesitate. When Iris said their daughter's tuition was too much, I wired the money before she finished explaining. I never asked for it back. Love doesn't keep receipts, at least. That's what I told myself. There are days when I wonder if my kindness made me invisible. Like the comfort of knowing I'd always say yes gave them permission to forget me. But I push those thoughts aside. Families drift. I tell myself, it doesn't mean they stop caring. That's why this New Year's dinner mattered. It wasn't about the food or the champagne, it was about being seen again, about feeling like a mother. Not just a voice on the other end of a phone call. I spent days choosing the right place. Somewhere elegant but warm, where the candles would glow like old memories. I even booked a table for 6. Just in case everyone said yes. Tonight, I thought, we might find our way back to each other. Maybe. For once, I wouldn't have to pretend that I was okay eating alone. By 6:30 that evening, I was ready. The table was booked. My coat was pressed. And the pearls rested against my neck like a promise I refused to break. I kept glancing at the clock, half expecting to see a new message pop up, a reminder that someone cared enough to say, we're on our way. Instead, the first vibration came from my phone just as I reached for my keys. Nathan's name flashed on the screen. A text. Short, apologetic in that distant, practiced way. Something about Lena not feeling well. Maybe a bad meal earlier. We'll catch up soon. Mom. I stared at it for a long moment, trying to convince myself it was sincere. Kids get sick. Plan change. I told myself not to take it personally. Not tonight. I set the phone down, exhaled, and reached for my coat again. That's when the next call came. Iris. Her voice was smooth. Too smooth, like she'd rehearsed it on her way to somewhere else. She said they'd had a long day, that everyone was tired, that a quiet night at home sounded best. She thanked me for the invitation, as if it had been some last-minute courtesy instead of something I'd spent weeks hoping for. The words rolled off her tongue so gently they barely sounded cruel. But they were. I felt the first crack open inside me. Small, but sharp. Then came Lena, my sweet granddaughter, always caught in the middle. Her voice was soft, rushed. She said she didn't feel great either. And before I could say anything, the line went dead. I stood in the hallway for a long time, phone in hand. The air around me suddenly too still. At first, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe they'd all really caught something. Maybe it was just bad timing. Families have off days. I pressed my coat flat against my chest and told myself, go anyway. Don't let this ruin it. But when I locked the door behind me, my hands trembled. The night air hit my face like cold truth. The streetlights blurred into halos through my tears. But I kept walking, one step after another, as if movement alone could keep me from falling apart. Driving through the city. The lights shimmered against the windshield, gold and white and far too bright for how hollow I felt. Every passing restaurant window showed faces leaning close. Laughter spilling out onto the sidewalk. I imagined myself among them. Imagined that my family was just running late. That at any moment, I'd hear their voices calling my name. But deep down, I knew. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was abandonment disguised as politeness. And somehow, that made it worse. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel and whispered to myself that I would still go. That I would sit at that table as planned pearls around my neck, head held high. If they chose to forget me, I wouldn't forget who I was. The restaurant doors opened with a rush of warm air and perfume, that particular blend of wine, roasted meat, and candle wax that always feels like celebration. I gave the hostess my name, and when she smiled and asked, "A table for 6, I nodded before I could stop myself. Then, after a beat, I whispered, "Just me tonight." Her smile faltered, just slightly, before she led me to the center of the room, a wide, round table under a chandelier that glittered like ice. I asked her to leave the other place settings. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted to believe they still might walk in, laughing and apologizing for being late. Or maybe I just couldn't stand to see the proof of their absence cleared away. Around me, the restaurant pulsed with life. Families leaned close, glasses clinking, bursts of laughter cutting through the hum of soft music. A grandmother at the next table was surrounded by her children, her hand resting proudly on her grandson's shoulder. I tried to smile for her, but my throat tightened instead. My own table gleamed too brightly, 6 empty glasses catching the light like tiny mirrors, reflecting my solitude back at me. I ordered a bottle of Bordeaux, Harold's favorite. When the waiter poured the first glass, I told myself it was in his honor. I raised it halfway to my lips before realizing I didn't have a toast to make. The wine burned a little going down. Time slowed. My fork felt heavy. My hands cold. I watched couples reaching across the table, fingers brushing over shared plates. I used to think love was about moments like those small, quiet gestures that say everything words can't. Harold and I had built a lifetime on them. Now, he said among strangers, the sound of their joy reminding me of everything I'd lost. I didn't cry right away. I held myself together the way I'd done 1,000 times before, with small breaths and a fixed smile. But when the entree arrived and the waiter looked at the 5 untouched place settings before asking, still, just one, something inside me broke. The tears came slowly, almost politely, slipping down my cheek one after another. I let them. There was no point pretending anymore. And just as I wiped the corner of my eye, I heard the sudden burst of cold air from the entrance. The doors swinging open. Hurried footsteps on the polished floor. A voice calling my name. Soft at first, then urgent. The first thing I heard was the sound of the doors slamming open sharp against the soft music and clinking glasses. A rush of cold air swept through the room, carrying with it the sound of hurried footsteps. I looked up, startled, just in time to see Noah, my grandson, pushing through the doorway. His coat half-zipped, cheeks flushed from the winter wind. He looked like he'd been running for miles. For a moment, I couldn't move. He scanned the room until his eyes found mine, and the relief that crossed his face made my heart twist. He rushed toward me, nearly tripping over a waiter's tray, and stopped right beside the table, breathing hard, clutching a crumpled envelope in his shaking hand. I could feel the restaurant pause around us, curious eyes following him, the world holding its breath. I asked what had happened, but my voice came out barely above a whisper. He just shook his head, tears shining in his eyes, and told me he couldn't let them go through with it, not again. His words tumbled out in fragments, each one sharper than the last. My family, my own children, weren't home nursing an upset stomach. They were at Romanelli's, another restaurant across town, sitting through the reading of Harold's will. They hadn't forgotten me. They had deliberately kept me away. The air seemed to leave my lungs. My hands gripped the edge of the table as the room tilted slightly. Noah pushed the envelope toward me, the same one that had come from Harold's lawyer earlier that day. He said it was addressed to me, but they'd kept it hidden. He'd read it. He knew he shouldn't have, but something inside him couldn't stay quiet. I opened it slowly, me fingers trembling. The first page was Harold's will, his name written in the careful, steady handwriting I knew so well. The truth spilled across the lines, everything he had left the house, the savings, even the lake cabin was meant for me. Only if I passed would it go to the grandchildren. Skipping over the children entirely, my sons and daughter-in-law had told me a very different story. Noah's voice broke as he confessed something else. He wasn't Iris's biological son. She had adopted him quietly years ago, and told everyone he was a distant cousin's child. She'd used him as presence, his charm, to stay close to the money. To me, I saw the shame flicker in his eyes. But I also saw something purer beneath it, courage. The kind Harold would have admired. In that moment, everything I thought I knew about family shattered, and yet, sitting there, I realized something else too. This boy, this trembling 17-year-old, who had risked everything to tell me the truth, was the only one who had come running for me. I reached across the table and took his hand. His skin was cold, his pulse racing beneath my fingers. I wanted to tell him he wasn't to blame. That love isn't defined by bloodlines or signatures on paper. It's defined by choice, by the people who show up when no one else does. For the first time that night, I didn't feel entirely alone. Mr. Prescott's office sat tucked behind a small brick bank downtown, quiet, unassuming. Exactly the kind of place Harold would have chosen. When Noah and I stepped inside, the air smelled faintly of old paper and cedar polish. The blinds were drawn halfway, letting in stripes of morning light that fell across the leather chairs and the neat stacks of folders on the lawyer's desk. It felt like stepping into a space frozen in time, deliberate, orderly, prepared. Mr. Prescott rose when he saw me. His eyes were kind but steady, as if he had been expecting this day for a long while. He said Harold had made sure everything would be clear when the time came. His voice carried that particular gentleness people use when speaking to someone who's already lost enough. He pulled a large folder from his drawer, thicker than I imagined, and placed it carefully on the desk between us. Then another. And then, almost reverently, a small digital recorder. Harold, he explained, had begun collecting evidence months before he changed the will. He suspected that the children might not respect his wishes. So he'd started recording every phone call, every family meeting, every request for money. He'd said his hearing was going. Ask people to speak louder. What no one knew was that he was documenting everything. The first recording clicked on with a faint hiss. Nathan's voice came through calm, confident, almost businesslike. He talked about how I'd been repeating myself lately, how it might be time to step in before she does something reckless. Then Iris, cool and measured, mentioned a doctor who could confirm things quietly. David laughed low and unbothered and said, once they got control, he'd restructure the accounts. The sound of their voices, my own children planning around me like I was an obstacle instead of their mother, sent a chill through me. I sat very still. I didn't cry. I just listened until the recording ended. The silence afterward heavy enough to press against my chest. Mr. Prescott then opened another folder, bank records, transfers, receipts. Every time I had helped them, every kindness, had been turned into indulgence vacations, spa trips, designer stores, each lie catalogued in black and white. And then came the envelope. Harold's handwriting on the front, that steady, deliberate script that had once written me love notes in the margins of grocery lists. Inside was a letter. 3 pages. Cream-colored. Folded with care. My darling E. It began. If you're reading this, then what I feared has happened. This is not your failure. You gave them everything. They failed to see the gift. I've done what I could to protect you. Every dollar left is yours not as a prize, but as peace. You don't have to fight. But if you do, I've made sure they cannot win. You are not alone. All my love. Always. H. My hands shook as I folded the letter again, pressing it to my heart. Mr. Prescott slid one final document toward me. A clause Harold had added: any heir who contests the will or my wife's competence forfeits their claim entirely. It was more than legal protection. It was Harold's final act of love. His way of saying, you are safe now. That afternoon, I called each of my children. My voice didn't rise. I didn't ask why. I simply told them I knew everything, that I was ending the cycle, that I wished them well. But they would not hear from me again. The silence that followed felt cleaner than any apology could have. When I hung up, the weight I'd carried for years seemed to lift. Harold had seen the storm coming and built me a shelter from it. And now, for the first time in a long time, I felt steady on my own feet. The house felt different after everything, quieter, but not in the lonely way it used to be. It was as if the air itself had shifted, lighter somehow, like it had finally exhaled after years of holding its breath. Noah stayed. At first just for a few nights, then a few weeks, until one day his things simply belonged there. He unpacked slowly, one drawer at a time, as though he was giving the house and me permission to heal. We began to rebuild, piece by piece. The lake house that Harold loved so much had grown tired over the years. Its paint faded, its wood swollen from rain. Noah sanded the deck and repainted the shutters, while I planted lavender along the front path, the way Harold used to like it. The scent drifted through the open windows, carrying a memory of summers past. For the first time in years, laughter filled the rooms again, quiet, unforced, genuine. I took back control of my finances. 2. Every account, every document, finally in my name alone. I set up a small charitable fund in Harold's memory, nothing grand. Just something that would help the children's hospital and the library in town. Harold would have liked that. He always believed money should move, not sit still. It felt right. Giving back in a way that honored him. Noah found his rhythm here. 2. He enrolled in a nearby art school. Spent his evenings sketching by the window. Charcoal smudged across his fingers. Sometimes I'd look up from my book and catch him smiling, not the forced kind, but the quiet smile of someone who's finally safe. Healing didn't erase the past, but it softened it. The bitterness faded, replaced by gratitude for the love I had, the lessons I learned, and the second chance I never expected. Peace, I realized, doesn't always arrive with fanfare. Sometimes, it just slips in quietly, like sunlight through the curtains. Tonight, the garden is quiet, except for the soft hum of crickets and the faint rustle of lavender swaying in the breeze. I sit on the porch with a blanket around my shoulders, looking out at the stars shimmering over the lake. The air feels gentle, the kind of stillness that only comes after you've stopped waiting for something that was never coming back. Inside, Noah's drawing hangs by the kitchen window, me at the stove, him at the table, sunlight spilling across the floor. Every time I pass it, I smile. It's not perfect, but it's honest. It reminds me that family isn't defined by who shares your blood, but by who stays, who shows up when everyone else turns away. I think Harold would be proud, not because I fought back, but because I finally found peace. Love, after all, isn't about holding on. It's about letting go with grace. If you've ever had to rebuild your heart, if you've ever learned to choose peace over pain, you're not alone. Maybe tonight, that's enough.